On today's episode of the No Gray Areas podcast, we welcome Simon Keith, world-class soccer athlete who survived 2 heart transplants. We discuss what it means to create a lasting legacy, how to present the best version of yourself, and his remarkable story that will leave you speechless. Let's dive in. Simon Keith, so good to have you on the No Gray Areas podcast. The audience, they just got a little snippet on the beginning to hear a little bit about your story. I just want the audience to think, though, for a moment. It's something we take for granted. Every single day, our hearts pump 2,000 gallons of blood. That means they beat about 100,000 times a day. We never really think about that. I bet you do now.
Yeah.
Because, here we go. You're on your 3rd heart.
I am. Yeah.
So, okay, run with that. What in the world? 3rd heart. I'm going to just set you up a little bit. Let's not talk about the second one yet.
Okay.
The second transplant. Let's go back to the first transplant. You were only 20 years old? Is that right?
I was 21.
Correct? 21.
Yeah.
21.
Yeah.
All right, run from there.
So, total, I'll say it humbly. I was a world-class athlete playing soccer, playing professionally in the UK, in the top divisions of England, and answered a call one day from a guy in Canada, the head coach of the Canadian World Cup team. He said, "Simon, we've been scouting you. You look like a good player. We'd like you to come back to Canada, stay at the National Training Center, and we'll grow as a team in preparation for the 1986 World Cup in Mexico City."
Wow.
And, it's the dream, man. Coming from my house, that's the dream.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's probably the dream of most athletes because, soccer's worldwide. It's one of the most popular sports worldwide. So there's probably more young people that dream of playing at the World Cup level than any other sport in a lot of ways.
Yeah. The most popular sport on the planet.
Yeah.
The World Cup finals watched by half the people on the planet. Like, it dwarfs some of the other sports that we may know. Anyways.
Yeah. And more Americans are starting to watch it now. It's getting crazy here too, which is fun.
On fire in North America.
Yeah.
It's on fire in North America.
Yeah.
So
you're a world-class athlete at that time.
Yeah, I was fit and strong, and I was the youngest of 3 boys, and my dad was a very good soccer guy, good player, good coach. Turned down Chelsea at some point.
You're kidding.
When he was younger. So my oldest brother was part of the Olympic program. My next brother, older than me, his name's Adam. Adam was 13 months older than me and was an absolute phenom. And at sort of 15, 16 years old, Adam was one of the best players in Canada, men included.
Yeah.
He was that dominant. Wow. And so
I'm guessing you were pretty tough then too, because you have 2 older brothers who are at that high level of soccer. And I know I had a younger brother. Older brothers can be kind of brutal to the younger brothers. So I'm sure you were tough as well.
I think I got tough. I was the runt of the litter, forgotten child, small, quiet, in the shadows.
Really?
Oh yeah. Just burning up inside every minute of every day, like somebody pay attention to me. And it didn't really happen till I left, went to England.
Yeah. Wow. So what position did you play?
I played center forward.
Okay.
So I came back from the UK and joined the Canadian program. And what I learned over in the UK is that everybody was fast, everybody was strong, everybody was fit, everybody was skillful, everyone was smart. And the difference between being an amateur player and a professional player is from the neck up. And it really was, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to step on a guy's neck? And so I learned this over in the UK, how to be a pro.
Yeah.
Lessons, tough lessons, scrappings, tough.
Yeah.
So when I came back to Canada, for some reason, this was leaving my body, this ability to step on people's necks, and it didn't make sense. So anyways, long story short, I got very sick and eventually was...
Was it, just out of curiosity, was it gradual?
Yeah.
Like I remember, again, I watched you have the E60, you have an interview that they did there with you, and then you wrote a book. We'll talk about that later. Yeah. But in both of those, you talk about how you started just being tired and sluggish. Was that kind of a slow process, or did you wake up one day and all of a sudden go, what's going on?
Yeah, no, it was like a water torture. It was just drip, drip, drip. And you're an athlete, right? You just think you're going to run through it. You're going to just grit it out. And I spent the better part of a year in and out of hospitals, and it would be, in the hospital for a couple of days, back training with at the high level with the national team, playing competitive games. The next day back in the hospital, like this yo-yo existence, just fighting, man, just fighting.
Yeah.
And it was a fight that my body wouldn't let me win.
What were they telling you at the time? Like, was there, because your hands were really white, right? Like your fingers, I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes doctors be like, all right, he's tired, but you have some other indicators. Were they giving you any advice?
Well, we had it all. I mean, I remember me and my pop sat in front of this psychologist and said, he's too stressed and he needs to slow down. And we looked at each other like, what a bunch of crap this is.
Yeah.
But we did everything. I went to the cancer clinic. I had, treatments for that. I had, it was just a crapshoot. It was just guessing for a long time until they narrowed it down to something's going on with the ticker. And I was eventually diagnosed with with something called cardiomyopathy, which is really just inflammation of the heart muscle. And it was due to a virus. So it was just luck of the draw.
You just had a virus and it went to your heart. And then what was the indicator on the heart, though? I mean, I'm assuming when you go in, they always take your blood pressure and heart rate and that. So that must have been somewhat normal for you, that they're not finding it right away.
Yeah, eventually they did what's called a heart biopsy. And a heart biopsy is they slice a bit of your neck open here, and they run a plastic tube down your vein, and then they run a big wire with some clippers on the end.
Yeah.
And you're still awake, by the way, watching this. I've had about 300 of these. Anyways,
wow.
super fun way to spend
now
Tuesday
you're
morning.
A book while you're this.
Yeah. This whole that now.
Yeah.
Anyways, they jam this thing down into your heart, and they grab a piece of the heart muscle from the inside. They pull it out, look at it microscopically, and they can tell if it's inflamed and what the problems are.
Wait. They grab a piece of your heart muscle while you're awake and pull it out?
Yeah. The medical term is they yank it.
They yank it out.
You can feel it.
You can feel it?
Oh, yeah. It's a yank. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So they do that. You're 21.
Yeah.
And now
I'm 20.
You're 20.
Yeah.
And now you're sitting down and they're telling you you have a serious heart condition.
Yeah. March 3rd, 1986. I remember the day.
You remember the day.
Burned inside me, man. Vancouver General Hospital. I'm sitting in a wheelchair. We've come over from my home in Victoria, which is on a ferry, me and my dad. And I'm outside the office, and I can see the doctor and my dad chatting. And essentially, the doctor was acting as judge and jury, and my pops was pleading my case, and it didn't matter what my dad said. So doctor comes out, looks me right in the eye and says, listen, we absolutely know what you have now. You have cardiomyopathy, you need a heart transplant, and you need it now, or you'll be dead in 6 months.
What in the world is it? How does that's hard for any human to process, but 20 years old?
21, yeah, 20 at the time.
Yeah. What was the first thing that went through your mind? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. A bit like the movies. I mean, I sort of left my body for about an hour, sort of in this fog and this haze. Didn't really say
like
much.
Wondering if this is really happening type.
Yeah. I've been, the word sort of heart transplant had floated around in the rooms, but it wasn't really a real thing. It was more like this long way off science fiction, I'll never get there sort of thing.
Yeah.
And now it was staring me in the face. But then after about an hour, I think being the third youngest son and being from a competitive household really helped me, because I just got pissed off.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, how do I get it? What's the quickest I can get it so that I can return to my life and move along?
Yeah. That's fascinating. So it takes you about an hour to go from this haze of like, is this really happening, to like, all right, I'm all in. I'm fighting this thing.
That's right.
I'm fighting this thing.
Yeah.
The competitive spirit, obviously, if you're a world-class athlete, you have to have it, right? But then your family, you're saying, you got these two older brothers. So where do you go from there then? You're like, all right, we're fighting this thing. So
it's a long time ago, right? 1986. And so they were only doing heart transplants in one place in Canada. It was on the east coast of Canada in Ontario. And so we packed up, and our cardiologist said, we're sending you. And so we go to the heart transplant center in middle of January or whatever it was, April. It was still freezing. And got to do all the tests again, right? Because now they got to do the evaluation. So they do all the physical tests and the x-rays and the this and another biopsy and
So they're yanking a piece of the heart muscle.
Yeah, the whole thing.
I use the medical term. The
yank. Yeah. And the psychologist, right, who I just failed miserably, because I'm just looking at her like, I'm not blinking, lady.
Yeah.
So Just get me the heart. I'm here.
I remember that in the E60 interview with you where you said if you could go back again, you would, because they didn't take it serious, like, or from their perspective, it wasn't that serious for you because you were in such the fighting mood, right? Is that, would that be the way to say it?
Yeah,
or?
I sealed my own fate when I got on, they do the treadmill test, and many people have had the treadmill test, right?
Yeah, and you were going to prove how fit you were.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Most people go 12 minutes, 14 minutes.
I'm tired.
If you're pretty fit, you can go 16, 17 minutes. And even though my heart was only working at about 20% of its capacity, I had been doing this specific treadmill test every Friday with the national team in preparation for playing at 7,000 feet above sea level in Mexico.
That's where the World Cup was going to be.
Correct.
That year.
So we had tubes around us, so we couldn't get the oxygen and the nose plug. So I knew this test, and I knew how to do it. I jumped on that thing and I gave it everything I got. And after 35 minutes and running 7 miles, I collapsed.
Yeah.
And the doctor walked in and said, "I don't know who sent you here. I've never seen anybody do what you've just done, ever. You don't need a heart transplant. Go home.
Yeah.
Go home."
Wow. So what happens after that then? So you're in Canada and they're telling you you're not getting a heart. You don't need one.
They said, actually what the advice they gave me was, go home, get sicker, and then come back.
Yeah, get sicker and come back.
Right.
So what was your response? What was your family's response to that?
Well, you figured out already our family. So when we have big family decisions, we used to sit around the kitchen table and we would chat about what our options were. And very quickly we figured out we're not going to do what they said. We're not going to sit around and get sicker and go back. So we just started to get on the phone and figure out where we could go. Turned out we could go to, I was born in England, so we went back to England in search of a solution outside of transplantation. And once I got there, I had actually made a decision about the medication that I was on. And I was pretty juiced up on some medication that kept me sort of alive. And
which was one of the reasons you could do what you did on the treadmill, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. I mean, I was jacked up on, on corticosteroids. I was just jacked up.
Yep.
And so I made the very private, risky decision inside my bedroom that I was not going to take any more medicine.
That was your own personal decision? That wasn't even a family discussion? That was
Nobody knew.
Yep.
And I went to England. I fell off the cliff.
So you started regressing fast?
Big.
Wow.
Big.
Like as in weeks, days?
It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not one to exaggerate,
but
I will tell you that we got to England in early May, and between sort of May 5th and the date that I got the transplant, which was July 7th, so about 2 months, I lost 35% of my body weight. Whoa. I ended up in hospital for the last month.
Wow.
I didn't eat the last month. I was being, fed through a tube, unconscious most of the time. And it sucks.
Yeah. So let me, because I want to keep going with this story, but let me just ask this question, because I started off by saying, again, something that most of us never think about, that our blood is pumping 2,000 gallons a day, beats about 100,000 times a day for it to happen. What is your heart not doing that's making you regress so quickly?
Yeah.
So again, audience, it's something that we just take for granted. Like I don't wake up and go, okay, heart beat now.
Yeah.
Or obviously I'm not doing that when I'm sleeping because I'm not even thinking about it speeding. But your heart's not doing what anymore?
It's an amazing organ, by the way.
Yeah.
It's the core of the human body for a reason. Mm-hmm. So what happens in healthy hearts is when your heart beats, the left ventricle fills up with blood. Okay. And so when it fills up with blood, there's this thing called the ejection fraction, and that is the amount of blood that's squeezed out of the left ventricle to your body. That's the pumping. That's the heartbeat. That's the pumping. And so in healthy humans, it's 75%, anywhere from 55 to 75% of that blood that goes into the left ventricle gets pumped out every beat, right? And that's what keeps your fingers warm and your toes warm and your oxygen to your brain.
Yep.
Yeah. So once you dip below 20% of that ejection fraction, then you start to become very critical. And if you get below 10, you absolutely need a new heart like today.
Yeah. And
I was in that zone.
You were in that zone
for a long time.
Yeah. Was your family if you were dropping or regressing that quickly, were they getting a little nervous? Were they trying to encourage you to go back on these things that you were taking?
Well, I got to a point, of course, once we got to England, my mom and dad, I was still really a young kid, right?
Yeah,
Even at
yeah,
21, you're
yeah.
still a young kid. And my mom and dad sort of stopped their life, and the community helped us, and we all went over. And they there was arguments about it, and I just was steadfast in, I'm going to do this my way.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to get turned down again.
I was
'cause
just
I'm
going to
jacked
say
up.
that's what you're going to make sure that when they see you this time, they recognize
Correct.
the situation
did.
that you're in,
And
they
they
did.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
So what was this back in 19? Did you say 86?
86. Yeah.
Yeah, back in 1986. What's the situation to wait for a heart?
Well, in 1983, that was really the tipping point for organ transplants. There was this sort of miraculous discovery of a medicine that allowed for you to allowed for the human immune system to regulate rejection and not die of just getting sick.
So if this would have happened to you 3 years earlier,
No bueno.
you don't have a choice. You
Yeah.
don't have a chance then.
Yeah, pretty slim. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
that was a tipping point.
okay.
So I get to 86, and I'm over there, and the guy who let me in his program was Dr. Terrence English, who's now Sir Terrence English. He's been knighted for his work. Incredible guy.
Wow.
And so Sir Terrence said, "Listen, we're gonna." He actually gave me a pager. Now I know you're old enough to know what a pager is.
I remember.
Not
pagers.
everybody
I thought
is.
it was so cool when I got one.
So the girls are gonna have to put a graphic up of what a pager is.
Yeah, exactly.
But he gives us this pager and he says, when this thing goes off, we've got your donor heart.
Oh man.
So you go home with this pager. Of course, I go home and immediately in the hospital. But my pops is looking at this pager every minute of every day, and my mom's saying, check the batteries, check the batteries.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You've been to Applebee's.
Yeah.
And you get the little thing and you go outside and wait, and then your partner says, get your back in there, make sure this thing's working. It's been 4 minutes.
Yeah. Well, again, for listeners who are too young to know what a pager is, I remember how exciting it was when it would go off. Okay, I can't imagine the excitement you must have felt when it finally went off.
Well, yes, I was wholly unaware of it because I was so far out of it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Just so far gone at that point?
Oh,
You'd regressed to the point?
Oh, yeah.
Was it like that for you 24/7 at that point?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Man, that had to be so difficult for your parents. Like, you're barely alive.
Yeah, my parents watched their young, athletic son wither away and essentially die.
Yeah.
Brutal.
This wasn't, I didn't pick this up, especially from the E60 interview, how bad it was for you, because that's what the audience is going to hear in a moment, is that you come back and you end up becoming a professional athlete again, which is, I didn't realize how far gone you were before this. So I'm getting ahead of the story here. So let's jump back again. So you find out they have a heart for you.
Correct. So I'm actually in the south east side of London, and the hospital is just outside Cambridge. And so on a Monday in the middle of rush hour, I've got to be loaded into an ambulance and transported to Cambridge. And I need to be there in like 2 hours, which usually takes 6 hours through rush hour. Yeah. And so an amazing system in England is that the police from each county hands you off, and lights and sirens until the next, and then the next county picks you up until the next. And
so you got a police escort.
They do this relay,
to get your new heart.
Yeah.
Are you still so out of it
I'm
that
out
it's
of it.
just you
I'm
don't?
out of it.
Do you even remember?
No.
You don't even remember.
No. I mean, I remember the fight.
Yeah.
I remember the fight.
Simon, I didn't pick that up from the what I read and
that's okay. ESPN, we got to keep it PG, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. But I just didn't realize, like, so you're so close to death, you don't even really remember some of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Tough on my folks, of course. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And I got 3 kids and 7 grandkids now, and I can't imagine watching one of them suffer like that.
Well, there's one thing worse: having your kids watch you die, which is what happened 5 years ago. We may get to that.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Can we jump forward a little bit in the story?
Yeah.
The guy that gives you the heart. What was crazy to me when I heard your story was you get this heart, and you move on with your life, and never really connected with this, didn't know really anything about where it came from, the heart, or who it was. So can you jump forward in the story? And we're going to come back to where we're at now. But
Yeah.
jump all the way forward to where you go finally meet this family.
Yeah, I took a lot of shit from that ESPN piece for coming off as, just brutally unfeeling and cavalier. And yes, I was very determined to look forward and not look backward. But, back in the 80s, the 90s, and really most of the 2000s until 2010, it was really prohibited for families and donor families and recipients to meet. It was the ultimate respect not to go seek them out.
So people were telling you that's not your place to go find them.
One person told me it's not my place, and that was Sir Terence English. And what he says, I do.
Oh, yeah.
He says, that's it. It's your heart now. You can carry on. You don't look back. It's over.
That is good to know, because some of our audience is going to go dig up the E60 piece. And when I watched it, I kind of felt that way a little bit. I'm
look at
geez. Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, you took the words out of my mind.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt that way, but that makes a lot of sense when you share that you were told you just need to move on. Like, it's not your place to go. And the guy that told you that is one of the most well-respected heart transplant doctors in the world.
That's right. But I also didn't want to know. So you can still sort of paint me with that sort of bullish brush. I didn't want to know, and the reason I didn't want to know is because, as I said in that piece, it was absolutely counterproductive to my goals.
Well, it's clear just sitting here and getting to know you. I mean, I read your book and I watched that piece, and that clearly comes out in there. But just the 30 minutes or so that we've connected here today, it's clear that you have that athletic, competitive driver. I don't care what mountain's in front of me. I'll find a way over it, through it, around it, under it. I'm doing it somehow. Yeah. It's clear that that's
Thank you.
Your personality and your drive.
Thank you, I think.
Yeah. No,
I'm kidding.
If we don't have people like that in the world,
that's
man,
right.
We're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
We need people like that. So, and I have respect for people like that and respect for people like yourself. But that's what you're saying. That's one of the reasons, though, that even if your doctor had said, don't go find them, you probably wouldn't have, because you're like, I had to move on and go after my goals.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't really a question I asked myself.
Yeah.
He told me, he said, this is yours. Don't look back, move forward. I said, okay, you're the guy, man. I'm doing what you tell me to do. Yeah.
How old was the kid?
17.
He was 17-year-old kid.
I was 21. Yeah.
Yeah. 17, 21. So what in the world, all these years later, how many years later was it that you went and met the family?
25.
25 years later. What drove you to do that then?
Well, I had made a pledge after I returned to play professional soccer, and it was terrible. It was hard. I made a decision when I retired. I would never, ever, ever speak about my transplant again. Ever, ever.
Because you were tired of people asking about it, right? That became your story.
Exhausted.
Instead of you being a professional athlete,
I was the heart guy.
The professional heart,
I was the heart
athlete
guy.
with the heart guy.
I was the heart guy.
Yeah.
And so even for cavalier me, 25 years, I mean, heart transplants, the data shows that they last 10, maybe 12 years on average. So even for a guy like me,
you're twice as you're
25.
Yeah,
25 years comes on the horizon. I'm like, okay. So I decided to write the book.
Yeah.
And I got a ghostwriter, a guy named Jason Cole, great guy, NFL beat writer and super guy. Anyways, Jason says to me, listen, there's only one way we can end this book. And I said, what is it? He says, you got to go meet the family.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'll go meet, if you find him, I'll go meet him. And he called me one day and says, we're going to Wales.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do remember that, though. You got tired of being called the heart guy. So I didn't know you well enough, but I was going to open this podcast by saying, so you're the heart guy, and see if you just reached across the table and throat punched me or something.
No.
But yeah. So what was that like then when you walked in the room with this, or actually you were in the room, they walked in the room, and you meet this family of this 17-year-old boy that 25 years before had died on a soccer field, by the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I think now, looking back on it, I have a different perspective. But I think in the moment, it was exciting. It was nerve-wracking. It was weird. You feel guilt, but it's not really guilt because you haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
You of course feel gratitude, but that's not a big enough word. I wanted him to be proud of me.
Mm-hmm.
Much like like he's a father, father figure. Like, I want you to be proud of all that, not I've accomplished, but we've accomplished together. So there's a whole batch of feelings.
Yeah.
It's a very, still to this day, not just with me and Roger, but between any organ recipient and a family whose loved one has passed away and donated, it's a very complicated relationship.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
complicated.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in the place, like if I had lost one of my kids and you were sitting here and it was their heart that you were carrying. I'm trying to imagine, but I can't. It's just, I
Hope
can't
you never
imagine.
have
what
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in some ways, and I don't know what they shared with you. You can share that in a moment maybe, but in some ways I would think, I'm just imagining, but I would think that it would be like, well, I lost a child, and especially if enough time had gone by, and I'm glad that there was a piece of them that helped someone else live their life.
Well, yes. So since the day that I got back from Wales and that fateful meeting with my donor family, I changed everything about my life, and I became an expert in organ donation and transplantation systems around the world. I am a world expert in this stuff, and I have met tens of thousands of donor families who has lost their loved ones, and every single one of them say the same thing. It's terrible. I miss my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife, whatever, but I'm glad I had the courage to say yes. It's the only single silver lining that came out of it.
Well, I was thinking about when I was driving here, because one of my questions, and I'll ask you now, we've queued it up pretty well right now, is I know that's something that you're a huge advocate for. And right on your website, you actually advocate for that. Hey, if you want to be an organ donor, here's how you can do that. And you have a link that they can click on. But I was thinking about that driving here, and I'm like, gosh, it's kind of crazy that I wouldn't have that, because when I die, whenever that is, I don't need my organs anymore. So for me to say, if you can, use these to give someone else life, why wouldn't I do that?
Well, I think it's an individual decision.
Yeah.
I think that, and so of course I advocate for people to say yes. I actually advocate more for people just to make a decision, because what's a terrible situation is when a loved one dies and the family's sitting there in that room at the hospital and someone asks them the question and they don't know the answer. That sucks. That sucks.
So that's important. I don't want our audience to miss that. You're saying a really important decision to make is, your answer may be no, I don't want to be an organ donor, but make the decision.
Just make the decision so your loved one doesn't have to for you and makes the wrong decision.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump back into your story, but right now is a good time to do it. I just mentioned your website. If they went to that, give us the address to your website. Is that where we want to send people?
Yeah. I mean, I got a couple websites, but the best one is simonkeith.com.
Okay.
It's easy. You can navigate from there.
Yep.
Get you to the foundation page, get you to other stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
simonkeith.com.
You'll see my big, beautiful face come up. So
over and over again. Yeah.
That's worth it just to do that.
Yeah. I like your haircut even more now, though, by the way, than you had it on there. So we're like twins. I like it. Yeah. So did they say anything? Did the family say anything to you that's memorable when you met them that first time?
Yeah. So in many cases, when families lose a child, that event tears a family apart. And this family was no different. And so I only met I can tell you his name's John Edward Groves. And I met John's dad, Roger. That's the only family member that I met. And Roger was kind and generous, and the grandfather in every Hallmark movie you've ever seen. He had a beautiful English wit about him. And probably the most poignant moment was me standing beside him at his son's gravesite and just having a quiet moment together. And what resonated throughout my mind in that whole day was, how do you say thank you to someone who gave you everything?
Wow.
Everything. And this man and his wife at the time made a very difficult decision in a time of horrific tragedy. They lost their son, and they had the courage to say yes to organ donation at a time when organ donation wasn't talked about or really known about. And so, how do you say thank you? I had two of my children there. I had my wife there. They're responsible for all of that, everything.
Yeah.
And I know what the answer is.
What's the answer?
Don't waste a fucking minute. Don't waste a minute.
That's how you say thank you.
That's how you say
truly
thank you.
Live.
Yeah.
Truly live.
Don't waste a minute.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the line of the podcast. That's a mic drop right there. You know, how do you say thank you to someone who gave you everything? But I love that you've thought through the answer. Yeah. So you come back. Now I'm backing up in the story.
Yeah.
So you get this, and again, Simon, I didn't realize, you know, watching this short documentary on your life, I didn't realize how close to death you were. So that makes it even more amazing that you came back from that and you become a professional athlete.
Yeah.
So share that a little bit. What was that journey?
When I woke up from the transplant, it was like a mini epiphany. I was alive again, and I could feel my hands and feet for the first time in over a year. And as I sat in that bed, I just the competitiveness just burned inside
That fire.
me.
Yeah.
And it was a blazing inferno.
You got a good heart then.
I got a good heart. Definitely got a good heart. And so now I had to travel down a path that I was naive about, and everybody around me didn't want me to do it. And again, my man, Sir Terrence, gave me the line that I've lived my whole life by. And he said, Simon, heart transplantation for you is to resume the life you led prior to being sick.
Mm.
And I don't think he really knew who he said it to.
Yeah.
But I took him very literally. And until today, I still live by that credo. Yeah. That's it, man. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm living the life that I was destined to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't go change who you were. You just went back to the Simon that drive, that competitiveness, all the things that you were before, your heart started giving out on you. You just went back to that.
Yeah.
But again, especially probably your loved one, I'm guessing your loved ones are like going, whoa, 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 because they don't know how this is going to, you got this other person's heart in your body now. Like, how's that all going to play out? Right?
And a pacemaker, the first of 15 pacemakers I've had in my life. So that's a new thing. And by the way, your heart, a transplanted heart is not connected to your central nervous system. So there's no connection to your brain. So you got all this shit going on.
I didn't know that.
Of course, it's cut out.
I mean, that makes total sense when you say it, but I did.
Yeah.
So is this pacemaker what's making it beat then?
No, once the heart, the heart is an electrical system, and once it starts, it can keep going forever. It doesn't need continual stimulation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's self-governing. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
But yeah, you can imagine, right? So there's the moments when you're by yourself and you're running until you throw up and you're questioning yourself and all that stuff. But probably the biggest challenge was, frankly, people around me. Imagine my mom, right? Imagine my former teammates and the administrators and the coaches and the attorneys and everybody, right?
And whoever's sitting up in the C-suite and deals with insurance companies.
Of course.
I'm sure they're going like, wait a second, do we let this guy on the field?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That went throughout my whole career. When I got back to our relatively small town of Victoria, British Columbia, 400,000 or 500,000 people, everybody knew the story. Everybody knew me. I couldn't eat a French fry without somebody sort of putting their eyebrow up, or God forbid I went for a beer.
Oh yeah.
So it was through love, but it was just so much.
I bet.
Too much.
I bet.
Yeah.
You were hearing like, hey, it's the heart guy having a beer.
That's right.
And that's why you were getting tired of that. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
how long did it take you to start feeling? You obviously had to take quite a while to get back to that athletic level that you were.
Yeah, it took it. I mean, I would say it took me a while. I started right away. I mean, I was arguing with physiotherapists after 10 days, like, get out of my way, get me on the treadmill. I'm not walking up 2 stairs and resting. Get me out of this place. I got to go. So, but the reality is, in terms of really recovering, I did that under the watchful eye of my dad. And so I got back to Canada, and we spent sort of the winter training privately. And he would get home from he was a school teacher, get home from school, and after school we'd go out and he'd do a 2-hour session with me and just run my socks off.
And he's watching closely. He's wanting to see how.
Yeah, and he's just letting the rope out a little bit more, right, all the time. And it got to a point where I would go to training and people would just look at me like, what what is going on with this guy? This is madness.
Yeah. Hey, listeners, we're taking a quick break to tell you about our sponsor, Alpha Progression, the no BS app for muscle growth that's taking the fitness world by storm. If you're serious about training and building real muscle in the new year, this is the app for you. As someone who's always been big into fitness, I can confidently say that Alpha Progression will totally transform your training. It's developed by experienced lifters and bodybuilders, backed by science, and trusted by thousands worldwide. I love how intuitive it is. It will make tracking your progress and adjusting your plans easy and effective. Voted App of the Day twice by Apple, it features a smart plan generator that tailors workouts to your goals and available equipment. Plus, their progression recommendations ensure you're making gains and not just going through the motions. Ready to elevate your training? Go pro with Alpha Progression for just $12.99 a month or $79.99 a year with a 2-week free trial. And here's the best part. Our listeners get 20% off your first payment at alphaprogression.com/NGA podcast 20. That's alphaprogression.com at NGA podcast 20. Okay, let's hop back into the episode. Fast forward where you actually become the first heart transplant recipient to get drafted to play professional sports.
Yeah, so I got out of Canada, not because I don't love Canada. I love Canada, but I went to UNLV.
Yeah.
Played a couple of years with my brother Adam.
What position does he play?
He plays center midfield.
Okay, I was right, and you were still playing center forward.
Center forward.
Yeah.
So it was.
He's giving you all the assists, right?
In theory. So, that's a whole thing too, right? Like that was the first time to be competitively playing anywhere. And so kudos to UNLV and the athletic department. I talk about attorneys and insurance guys and athletic directors and all that.
They were
right?
taking a chance.
And, you're playing in the middle of August and it's 115 degrees and you're playing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So
a little extra burden on the heart.
A little curiosity but from a standard level, not that it's not good, but it was a step down for me. I'd been playing professionally and at the World Cup level. So it was a step down for me. But I had this complication of, this new heart and a pacemaker and trying to figure out what that looks like and no connection to your nervous system and all that. So there was a whole bunch of stuff there. Anyways, I got through the couple seasons. Me and Adam played together and got invited to the All-American game, the Senior Bowl for all the All-Americans in my what's now called my senior year. And, you have a combine like they do in all pro sports. How fast can you run? How high can you jump? All that crap. And the day before the Senior Bowl, a guy I didn't know anything. I was Canadian, didn't know anything like this existed. So a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, his name happens to be Al Miller. I'm Al Miller. I'm the general manager of the Cleveland franchise. We have the number 1 pick, and we really like you. We think you're the best player here, and we want to draft you number 1 tomorrow." And I'm like, "Okay, sounds great."
Did you have a feeling that could happen, or was that a shock to you to hear that?
I was oblivious. I was just there to play soccer. I was just having fun with one of my other teammates, Eddie Annable.
So now you're finding out that you're going to be able to play professional, but not just that, to be the number 1 pick.
Yeah. But then he says, but I understand you have some sort of heart thing.
How did you explain that?
And so I had grown weary of explaining it, as you can imagine.
Yep.
And I looked him dead in the eyes and I said, "Yep." And he said, "Can you tell me what it is?" I said, "Sure." I had 1 out, I had 1 in. And I walked away.
That was it.
He tells the story later. He's still around. He's still in Florida and retired and involved with soccer. He said, at that moment, he knew I was going to draft you. He says, "I knew I was going to draft you number 1. Then later in the day, he comes back.
You didn't realize, but you gave him the right answer. Because that's the kind of person you want. Someone with that that edge, that drive.
Yeah. So he comes back to me and he says, "Listen, we think we are going to pick you number 1. We'd like you to try and do well tonight in the All-Star game. And if you could win the MVP, that'd be great." And so in my life, of course, I play well and I win the MVP. And the next day I get drafted number 1 overall in the country, exactly 3 years to the day after my transplant.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Did it matter to you at that, because you hate being the heart guy at that time? Were people talking about the first heart transplant recipient to ever play professional sports? Was that being thrown around at the time?
Not when I first got drafted and I was at that All-Star Classic. Not then. Almost immediately after.
Yeah.
I mean, it was big guys, right?
Did it still bother you? Or were you starting to was there a little bit of pride in that at this point? Like, yeah, I guess I am.
It was obligation to the franchise at that point. it was madness.
Yeah.
It was madness.
Was it still wearing on you then? So they're talking about your heart instead of how you played in the game?
It drove me out of the game.
Oh,
Drove me out of the game.
okay.
So what would happen is inevitably we would play on a Saturday night as an example. Guys would have Sunday off and a rest day and a light day on Monday and then play again on Tuesday. Not Simon. After Saturday, Sunday morning, you're on a plane somewhere to go do a TV interview, and then on another plane to do a radio interview. Meet the team on Tuesday, just an hour before the game. Play the game. On Wednesday, you're on another plane. Now you got to go to LA and do a TV show, and then you got on and on and on and on.
I see what you. So when you're saying it was madness, it was that whole.
It was madness. I called my then girlfriend, now wife, Kelly, when I was in Milan, Italy, doing an Italian. We had 3 days off, and the team had sent me to Milan, Italy, to do a talk show, an Italian talk show, TV show in Italian, of which I do not speak. And I'm sitting there and going, "What in the am I doing here?
Yeah.
What am I doing? What am I doing?" I called her. I said, "I think my career is over."
How long have you been playing by then?
I played before and after I played 6 professional years. After I played 4 seasons.
Yeah. But at this point,
it was enough.
You just.
I just what am I doing? I'm looking around like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with the game.
So you didn't really lose the love of the game. It was all the other extracurricular stuff that just had gotten wearing on you?
Yeah, I think so. The reality is I was, it's going to sound funny being the number 1 pick overall and deemed maybe the best college player in the country at the time, but I was half the player that I was before.
And you knew that?
Yeah, it was a grind, man.
It was probably frustrating to you.
It's hard to describe how much of a grind it was. It was really tough. Yeah.
Well, every level someone goes up in sports, it gets more of a grind and it starts turning into more of a business, right? Like I just know like players that go from high school into Division I, all of a sudden that Division I level is just like it's your job now. It's your full-time job now. And I can't even imagine that next step up, where you were.
And I was stepping down from when I was 18, 19, 20, where I was at the peak playing in the English League, playing at the World Cup level.
Yeah.
And I'd stepped down, and it was tough. It was tough. It's probably tougher than I've ever admitted to anybody.
Yeah. Do you ever? We can even edit this next question out if you want, because I don't know if it's a safe question to ask, but I'll just throw it out there. Do you ever wonder what could have been?
Not really, because I met my wife and all the stuff. I wouldn't change anything.
But you never asked that question. Where you're sitting now, you're saying you have enough hindsight where you're going like, oh man, enough good things happen, I wouldn't change it. But during the journey, did you ever ask that?
No. It doesn't matter. When you're on the field and you're competing athletically, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you had a knee surgery, a shoulder surgery, a new heart. It doesn't matter. It's you against the other person.
Yeah. Yeah, with Simon, a heart transplant is a little different than knee surgery. And so almost everybody in the field's had an ankle or knee or shoulder. But again,
doesn't matter.
You're the only one out there with a new heart.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You don't get a free pass.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. And none of the other players out there, the competitors, are thinking that way. So you go 25 years with this heart where they tell you might get 10 or 12 out of it.
Yeah.
Once you get to 10 or 12 and you're moving on, now you're out of your professional career. Are you waking up every once in a while wondering, okay, how long is this going to go?
By the way, it's 10 or 12 now. It was 50-50 to live 7 years when I got it.
Oh, okay. It was 50-50 to live 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then let me rephrase my question.
No, it's okay.
So after 7 years, you've already beaten the 50-50 odds. Are you waking up now going, all right, how many more years I got?
Every day since I got my first transplant, there's been a clock ticking in my head, and it's relentless, and it just ticks nonstop. And it's a reminder just to go faster, more, stronger, more. It's relentless.
Is that good or bad thing?
I'm only starting now to have any peace in my brain.
Really?
Yeah.
What's bringing peace now?
I've made it. I've ticked all the boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're around 2019, was it, where you get the second one?
Yeah.
And I'm jumping back now in the interview a little bit where you said earlier it's pretty tough for your kids.
Yeah.
Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah. So about 2018, I'm 32 years in on this ticker, and a great group down in San Diego, UCSD. My guys Eric Adler and Victor Pretorius take care of me, and they. Eric had been on me for about 5 years before that. You should think about getting a second one. It's going to catch you. It's going to bite you in the butt. You should do it. You should do it. It's going to be hard. Da, 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 da. Of course, Superman, right? Competitive. No way, man. I got this. So I get to 2018 and my wife starts to say, you're decreasing. You're declining. You don't look great. You're not da, 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 da. And so I succumb to Dr. Adler's advice and say, okay, I'm ready. I'm not really ready. My body's ready. My kidney starts to shut down, so I have to go on dialysis because that's a side effect of end-stage heart disease.
Okay, I was going to ask. So your kidneys are shutting down because of the heart
Correct.
issue. Yeah.
Correct. And I've been taking this medicine for the last 32
hard
years.
On the kidneys,
yeah, it's hard on the kidneys. So the challenge that we've got is that now you're going to introduce a third immune system to this body, because I've got my immune system, I've got the immune system from my first heart donor, and now I'm going to introduce a third immune system. And so it's a medical terminology called being sensitized. And what that means is that I was sensitized up to 98.75. So you want a low number, not a high number. A high number means that 98.75 of all hearts that you try to transplant into this body will reject immediately.
Oh.
So my pool goes from 100% of people who pass away and are organ donors to 1.25%.
Wow.
So odds are long. And so eventually I get put on the transplant list. And there's something you can do where you can bring that sensitized number down. So we did that, and it's no fun. It's basically chemotherapy, and you're blasting your immune system, and you're taking all your blood out of your body and treating it over and over and over again. It's called plasmapheresis, and it, for me, was absolutely brutal. And so they usually do 4 sessions, and they got aggressive with me, and they wanted to do 4 sessions of 4 sessions. They want to do 16 sessions. And once I got to the 15th session, in December of 2018, I had to raise the white flag because I was going to die the next day. And I knew it.
The chemotherapy was killing
brutal.
You. Yeah.
Brutal. I lost 20 pounds in 1 week.
Oh, man.
It was brutal. And I woke up one Saturday morning and my wife was there and my kids were coming from Las Vegas. And I woke up and I said to my wife, today's the day. I'm going to die today. So you shouldn't have the kids come. And I was sure that I was going to die that day. That was in December. I made it to March. And, whatever spiritual following you have, for some reason I was rescued again from the brink of death.
Wasn't your time.
Man, I weighed 129 pounds at surgery. I weigh 185 right now.
Wow.
I was nothing. Yeah, it was brutal.
When you went back in to get those tests prior to you doing all the chemotherapy and everything, did they put you on a treadmill again?
Yes, they did.
Did you take it easy this time?
I failed miserably.
I bet you did. I bet you did. So you learned your lesson from all those years before.
For sure.
Do you know whose heart it is this time?
I do. A heart and kidney. I got a heart and kidney.
Yeah, that's right. That's
so
right.
you get the heart on one day, and then the next day they give you the kidney.
Same person?
Same donor. Yeah, I do. I know the widow of the man who passed away. From the East Coast, and a little more private, and I respect that, of course. I've spoken to her, and same question, right? How do you say thank you to these people? And I got a boy's heart when I was a boy, and I got a man's heart when I was a man. He was the same age as me.
Yeah.
And so his family has lost their patriarch, and she's lost her husband, and their children have lost their dad and grandfather, and so it's complicated. It's tough.
Simon, I can't, and I'm going back to something we talked about earlier, but I can't imagine processing all the feelings that you must have to deal with, whether you're the survivor of someone who's the donor or you're the recipient of it. I mean, I'm sure it's got to be confusing, inspiring. It's just crazy to think about.
It's taken me really in the last sort of 10 years that I've finally gotten comfortable in my skin, because I would be that guy who would walk into any room and people would whisper and gawk and kind of look like, and it's not bad. It's mostly because they love you and they don't know what to say. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what to do. And so, and that's not only the donor families on both sides, but it's all my friends and all my loved ones. And, me and my wife have been at this for 40 years now, so we're pretty good at it, but it's taken a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you learned through this? You shared one of them, to live, to really live. What are some other things that you learned through this journey? As we're wrapping up this episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment on something you'll take away. All right, let's hop back into the remainder of the episode.
Well, I spend most of my days now, as I mentioned to you before, for more than a decade, I became really an expert in organ donation and transplantation, which I thought was really my calling. And what I learned throughout that process is that I spend most of my time now talking with people about being the greatest version of themselves and what that means. And it sounds really hokey and really complicated, but it's actually really simple. Most people struggle with it because of it could be fear.
Mm-hmm.
The fear of being great is really powerful. And many people struggle because they just don't know how to do it. And so I talk to people about that. That's what I've really learned. I've learned about teaching people about things like time management and health and wellness and, what's your educational goal? What's the pathway? What's your financial plan? Blah, blah, blah. And then you get into complicated stuff like, what's your brand? What's your brand, man? Who are you? What are you trying to do? What's your legacy going to be? And so I talk to people about this kind of stuff.
That is such a powerful question, that last one, isn't it?
Oh.
I mean, I think if our audience pays attention, I would encourage our audience,
Yeah.
and I want to encourage myself too as well, to ponder that for a little. What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing is, statistically, our great-grandkids won't even remember our names. If I asked you, name your 4 great grandparents, paternal and maternal, you could probably do it. If I said name your 8 great-grandparents.
Not a chance.
No,
That's
and
right.
most people can't. So handful of decades from now, for you and I, where we're at in age, our own family won't even remember our names. But that doesn't mean that you didn't leave a legacy.
Right.
So I love that question. What do you want your legacy to be? That's one of the things that you ask people to wrestle with.
Yeah. So I take people through the whole journey, right? That's near the end of sort of this greatness journey. But you'd be surprised, and maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I am shocked when I talk to young, high-functioning, super bright, professional people who have no plan.
Yeah.
And then you get past that, and then you start to ask questions like, what do you really want to be doing?
Yeah.
I know you're doing X, but what's in your soul that you want to do?
Yeah.
And why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
That's a tough question too.
Where do you think people lose that? Because I think most of us, when we're little children, we don't know ourselves well at the time, but we're dreamers. We're imagining. We're like, I want to do this. And it doesn't matter who tells you, well, that's impossible. But somewhere along the line, we kind of lose that, don't we?
We do.
Where do you think that is, or why?
Well, again, I think it's 2 reasons, right? Either fear, right? It's the fear. And many times it's fear of judgment. And that is when you start acting differently around your loved ones and you say things like, I am going to be great. I am going to change the world. They're like, no, you're just little Simon, the third of 3 boys from a small town in Canada. How can you possibly say that you're going to be great?
Yeah.
And it's not their fault, but we listen to those voices and they sort of tug us down and tug us back.
Yeah.
I
think you're right.
So that's one thing, right? When you start acting different and you get judgment, and then that little voice in your head goes, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
F that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that they don't know how to do it. They don't know the steps and the plan of how to be great.
Yeah.
You can systemize this stuff.
And that's one of the things you do is you help people walk through that now. Yeah.
Every day I talk to dozens of people and I coach people, and it's like, it's so fulfilling. And what's most fulfilling for me is that it's not about me. And I see that person's light go off, and I'm like, oh, they got it. They
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's got to be fun to see people get that spark, that something ignites in them, right? And they have that passion.
Yeah.
That I think, again, most of us had at some point when we were younger, and for some reason or another, it was lost in there. And I would agree with what you said. I think it's familial roles, whether it be friends or family. You just get trapped in that. Everybody's thinking, well, this is who you are. And deep down inside, you may go, I think there's more to me, though.
In virtually every human. Here's the challenge. I can remember vividly last year, I stood in front of 2,000 people. I do a lot of public speaking. And I sat in front of 2,000 people. I stood in front of 2,000 people to tell my story and motivate, inspire, etc. And I said, listen, don't offend anybody, but there's 2,000 of you in here. I'm only speaking to 5 of you because only 5 of you are going to do anything about it.
That's good. I like that.
It's true.
Yeah.
What happens is all 2,000 think they're the 5, but the 5 absolutely know they're the 5.
Yeah.
You got to do it too. You got
Yeah.
to take action. Yeah. Anyways.
How do you help someone, though? Because you're wired, you have that competitive spirit and that drive, and you've always had it. You had it before, and then you're saying you wake up in the hospital and you feel that again, when you're 21 years old and you got this new heart in you. In 2,000 people in that audience, not everyone's wired that way. So how do you help someone like that?
So 2 things that I find when I speak with people, 2 most important things that I talked about. I even kick myself when I say it. One is, what in the hell is your financial plan? That's number 1. Number 2 is, let me show you the steps to greatness. Let me show you. There are steps to greatness. You don't know them. I'm going to teach them to you. And once I teach them to you, you're going to figure out, I'm going to go down this path. By the way, you're also going to trip and you're going to fall.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be there. I'm going to hold a mirror up to you. I'm going to say, you're the reason that happened. Not anybody else, not because your boss, not because your spouse, not because it's because of you.
Yep.
So young people, when I talk to, need a financial plan, and they need a mentor/accountability person that's going to say exactly what they need to hear.
Yeah.
Not what they want to hear, what they need to hear.
Why did you lead with financial plan?
Because I would say north of 90% of all people I talk to don't have one.
Yeah.
North of 90% of the people I talk to don't have a financial plan.
And what's the problem with that?
They don't know what to do.
Okay.
They don't know.
Yeah.
And they're embarrassed to ask the question. And we've been taught generationally not to talk about money, not to talk about goals.
Yeah, most families, I think you're right.
How do you not have a net worth evaluator every month?
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah,
I could go on all day about that.
No, I see your passion come out, and we could do a whole nother podcast on some of these things. I think it's so good. What's next for you? Like what's your passion for whatever? And you don't know what yours are, and I don't know what mine are. How many days we have left?
Yeah.
You've got 2. You're on your 3rd heart.
Yeah.
I'm still on my 1st one. You might outlive me, right? We just don't know.
Yeah.
But with the time that you have left, what are some of your goals? What are your passions?
Yeah, I think the foundation is an interesting thing for me. The Simon Keith Foundation, we started 10 years ago-ish. And I thought it was a smart business move. I think that sounds a little cavalier, but I think that was part of it. I thought it was a good legacy play. I thought it was a good branding play. I thought it was cool. And what I've learned 10 years later is that none of that stuff matters, because when you see Junior, who you've supported and, paid for their swimming lessons or whatever it is, and they're thriving, and that's a cool moment.
What does your foundation do?
We support kids who have had organ transplants and their desire to be active and healthy again.
Yeah, I can totally see what you're saying, that you started it for all these reasons, but when you actually see that young human, that young boy or that young girl, recipient of what your foundation does, changes it, huh?
We think we're helping them.
Purpose.
We think we're helping them.
Yep. Well, there's a whole nother podcast there too. I'm convinced that when we do good, whatever that good is, we're we're benefiting someone else, but we have no idea what that does to us
Yeah.
in our own soul.
I think to answer your question, I would say about 5 years ago, I had the courage to look myself in the mirror and say, I'm going to be the guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the guy that people want me to be. I'm going to carry the flag. I'm going to stand in the room. I'm going to win the awards. I'm going to raise the money. I'm going to ask people for millions of dollars. I'm going to be the guy.
Yeah, for the foundation.
Yep.
Instead of it being kind of a side thing, something you started for maybe these reasons. Now it's part of the center of who you are.
Yeah. We literally started this to raise 10 or 20 grand to help a kid. We're gonna be at 10 million soon.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But you gotta be courageous, right? You gotta stand up and say, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Come with me.
Yeah. And that's if people wanted to learn more about the foundation, they would go to the same place.
Yep. Yeah. SimonKeith.com. You can get there from you.
Yeah. Well, Simon, thank you so much for being on here. Man, I loved watching the documentary. I loved reading the book, but it has been even a greater joy to meet you in person. Just great respect for what you're doing, great respect for your foundation.
Thank you.
And who knows, maybe sometime in the future we'll figure out a way to work together because love what you're doing. So we finish every time with 2 truths and a lie.
Yeah.
And it's ironic because we call this no gray areas.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you to lie. So
Okay.
our audience has heard you for about an hour.
Yeah.
I've read your stuff. I've talked to you about an hour. See if you can stump us. So give us 3 statements. 2 are truths, 1 are a lie, and I got to guess the lie.
Okay. First one is, I wrote them down, so that's why I'm reading.
Yeah.
On my dad's side, I'm 5'8", as you know when I walked in. All my uncles on my dad's side are over 6'5".
Oh, man. Okay.
Number 2 is when I was in the 6th and 7th grade, I was the city chess champion.
Okay.
And number 3 is I wasn't allowed to wear jeans to school until I was in the 11th grade. 2 truths and a lie.
Oh, man. Those are good ones. Generally, I do pretty good at these. I usually get it down to 50-50 because so there's one of them that's kind of given away.
Okay.
I don't even have a good guess on which one. So this is going to be total guess. I'm going to say number 3, you didn't wear jeans until high school to school.
You think that's
I'm going to say
a lie?
that's true. I'm going to say that's true.
You think that's true?
Yeah.
That is true.
Okay, so now I got it down to 50-50.
Yeah, good job.
All right. I'm going to go with number 2 being true, and the only reason is because I'm guessing you did that because if you were a professional athlete, no one's thinking that you were a chess champion. So I'm going to say that's true.
Number 2?
Yeah.
It's false.
Oh, you got me. So your uncles on your dad's side, or it'd be all your uncles.
Yeah, or 6'5".
What?
Or taller, yeah.
And are your brothers tall?
No.
Did they get any?
No, none of us got it. None of it. None of us.
And your dad? What about your dad?
5'8".
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Those were good, man. You got me. You
By the way,
that one.
the second one, the chess champion, that's my brother. He was
Yeah.
chess champion 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then why didn't you get to wear jeans? Did you go to a...
My dad wouldn't let me.
Okay.
He wouldn't let us.
Okay. I assume maybe it was like a private school or
No,
something.
just one of his things, man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Simon, thank you so much, man. It has been a pleasure. Really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Really encourage our audience to go to, give us it one more time, Simon Keith.
SimonKeith.com.
SimonKeith.com.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Awesome, man. Thanks, brother.
What an incredible story from Simon Keith, a true testament to living life to the fullest. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. We'll catch you in 2 weeks with another new episode.